I believe most capital has motivation, and you should understand the motivation of the money that you may or may not accept. Sometimes people will look at their diploma or some moment that they have. I have a screenshot from a Yelp page that says "Find salads permanently closed," and it's just like this great reminder. Is like that was some dumb stuff. My take is I am trying to delay any business that needs outsized capital as long as possible from taking that outsized capital. The idea that humanizing your company can be a competitive advantage is something that many of these businesses that are for sale, they just haven't thought of.
Thanks for coming on the show, LaSean.
Hey, Elijah, how you doing, man?
Doing well. I'm excited to jump into some nitty gritty with money today.
I love it. Let's go.
So start with, what is the point of raising capital in any vehicle for a company? Where do you see the point of a capital injection for a business, the pros, the cons, and when to do it and why?
Yeah, well, I'll kind of start or preface with some of the tenets that are important to me. I'm looking many times for the predictability of the business growth, the quality of the product, and the velocity at which the team is executing. And there are many ways to go kind of get some insights into those things. But ultimately, capital infusion is largely going to be around velocity. It's going to help you move more quickly. If it's something obviously very high risk, which I don't do, it can help you explore or validate something that maybe we don't even know if it's possible. So we think about deep tech, folks building, rockets or biotech or other types of things. You many times, like, you don't even know if there's a there, right? And so it's a technically hard problem. I tend to prioritize problems where the market is the real challenge. And the reason, and I'm giving you this some context before we dive into, like, well, what's the use of money? Uh, I believe most folks are trying a one size fits all kind of model with capital. And there's so many ways to, I think, be maybe more thoughtful on why you need money. The common refrain from the Naval Ravikant 4 points of leverage, there's capital, human labor, code, and media. What I love about simplifying it down to those pillars, whether or not that's the exact taxonomy that we should agree on, is that what you're trying to do is to figure out how to kind of do more with less, or kind of expand for whatever your footprint is. And many times when I hear folks say, well, we need to raise capital, let's say it's a friends and family round or some type of pre-seed, and you need $250,000, $500,000 to go and like validate, is there a there, is there even a market, before you start running your actual product experiments. And for many times, I believe folks think that spending their way into solving those problems is going to help them kind of move forward. And I just don't agree with that. I think we can talk about this. I think there are plenty of low to no cost ways to go validate the market. And the longer you can delay the need of bringing kind of other folks to your house to sleep over, the more autonomy and options you're going to have. And so ultimately, I think that capital is there to help you grow, and I think there's more than one way to grow. So we should not treat all capital as equal, since they come with different expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. We think of capital as being money which you spend, which is true in a very reductive sense. But the capital, when you're raising, needs to have a particular purpose, and that needs to fit within the greater construct of the business. And so not all money is equal. Not all investment vehicles are equal. And I think that there's kind of this current movement, I feel like, of looking at alternatives to venture capital and kind of Silicon Valley model of raising money. Would you say that you are anti venture capital?
So yeah, I'll give an asterisk, to that previous point. I believe most capital has motivation, and you should understand the motivation of the money that you may or may not accept, right? And that's I
The
think
money itself has kind of a
it
goal and a
has
motivation.
motivation.
I like that.
Yes.
I like that.
And so with that context, I'm not opposed to venture. Um, the bulk of the work I do nowadays, it is in categories that have historically been venture. most of what I'm doing right now is vertical B2B SaaS, and so that's about as kind of typical as you can get. But the reason I think I can tackle those is number one, that's a pretty mature playbook, right? Like we know what it takes to open and launch and grow a SaaS business, and there's some tricks that are still in the bag. Maybe Gen AI or some other things start to help evolve or allow new entrants to play. But this is not a complicated business. I look at it more of like starting an Italian restaurant than I do of like this is tech, right? And I don't really love when people try to over complicate or make it too sophisticated. For the most part, SaaS products today are workflows tied to some type of database. And yeah, maybe it's relational, maybe it's unstructured. Like there's also all sorts of ways we could say like, well, mine's different, right? There's not a ton of folks where, even someone like, if you're familiar with Frame.io, I think they sold to Adobe. They're just kind of a video annotation and collaboration tool for video editing, across television, film, advertising, what have you. There's a little bit of stuff where they had to, have some video encoding and what have you. But at the end of the day, like these are just not complicated products. The UX might be a complicated challenge to find the right UX for the customer, but the actual tech building is not complicated.
It's not
And
hard
so
sciences. There's no like proprietary special algorithms. It's like we
yeah,
got a
like
bunch of users, so Adobe wants more users and maybe a different
yeah,
platform. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, even going to something like Figma, there's some real technical innovation on WebAssembly and how they, kind of use. I don't think all of it is GPU accelerated, but they're using certain tools to, really give you a responsive interface. And like, there's a lot of goodness in there. But again, that's more of a staffing talent issue where it's just like, here's what we want to do. Let's go work back from there. We have all these browsers with various, implementations. But again, like none of this is that hard. And so when I think about that, my brain says, well, don't chase capital that is motivated and is going to charge you for charging, solving really hard problems, right? And so like that's the first thing my brain says. It's like VC money historically, was, whether it was like semiconductors or other types of things that it was really trying to tackle, you
Personal
needed this
computers,
capital.
Apple.
Yeah, like exactly, right?
Yeah.
You needed this
Yeah.
capital to really even see if this thing was feasible. And so if somebody comes with a crud, kind of create, read, update, delete type simple SaaS app, it doesn't mean like the app is not worth chasing, but you better not, go get capital that's motivated for that to be amazing because it has a natural plateau in how you've actually, identified the problem. And so, to your question, I look at the, the types of problems that folks are solving. And for the most part, I don't, it'd be nice and pithy to say, I think 1% problems need VC and then the rest can be, bootstrapped or alternative sources. Yeah, I don't know the split, but I do believe that, there is a whole class of businesses that are just fine. Almost every city has an Italian restaurant. We didn't say like, well, we don't need Italian restaurants anymore. Like it's okay. And typically in a large city, you're going to find, some Italian restaurant that is crushing it, right? You're going to find some that are going out of business, but you're going to find one or two that are crushing it. And so this is a known problem to a local market, and it's a great business. And so I think it was Rob Walling. He runs Tiny Seed, and he has, his articulation is 90% of businesses should be bootstrap, 9% should be finding some type of slow growth capital, and then 1% should be on the VC train. And again, I don't really have any data to pull from, but I think his rule of thumb is something I would be directionally aligned with.
Yeah, and to extend the Italian restaurant analogy a bit further, just because the restaurant is doing well doesn't mean that it needs to be turned into a nationwide chain and it needs massive growth. It needs to be international and franchised, right? And that's kind of where
100%.
maybe 1% does, right? Or maybe 1% wants to, and therefore VC is aligned in terms of the motivation and the money to help achieve that. But you're essentially paying a premium for that dollars because those dollars are trying to get you to the multinational, McDonald's, right? Which is a very different situation versus saying, hey, let's help this business grow. Let's help it run more effectively, pump out more free and clear profit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, and building on that, I have a personal anecdote there. So I went to school in grad school in DC, and there was some folks from my school had started this salad company called Sweet Greens, and the first
I
location
love
was just
sweet
up the
greens.
street from campus. And so, I became a customer. I kind of understood the product. And I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. And years later, I had some capital, personal capital deploy. I wasn't a very sophisticated investor at the time, and I was like, all right, they're doing it wrong. And here's the better way. And I have a pescatarian diet, and so many times when I'm out, I'm eating salads or some type of vegetarian thing because I can't always get fish. So this is the backstory for how I started looking into this problem, and I said, I am going to start a better version of this here on the West Coast. And it's going to have a great tech stack. I'm going to do, both on the customer engagement side, but also on my supply chain. And we're never going to have this bad lettuce problem. And, I had built all these little custom versions. If you've used the profit model from Facebook, it's a forecasting model where you give it a bunch of tabular CSV data and it'll give you all these anomalies. I'm just super smart. And it's this is just salad, right? I had a great brand, had a good location that was
how
in
to
this.
over engineer salad making.
Yeah, bro, this was the worst. If you're give me an example of the most software thinking version to start a business the wrong way. I was the poster child, and so I created this business with my own money. So I mean that was the good thing that I didn't let anybody down. But it was called Fine Salads, and quickly we got into this business, and it was oh crap. My brain was I'm going to go prove this out quickly, and then after the first 3 local businesses, I'm going to throw some cash on this from outside investors, and this they're going to be Fine Salads all over the place, right? And number one, that never happened. Number two, what I quickly found was if I had just looked at taking the same amount of money and just said, these are only ever going to be 3 business. There's only going to ever going to be 3 of these. I would have normalized that business. The unit economics were there, the principles were there, but I was all right, now we need a SOP where we can train up a general manager in this amount of time because we can't just have one, or 2 great people leading these things. I need to be able to swap them out and commoditize. It was all this silly thinking. And
all this scale thinking that wasn't necessarily solving the problem that you needed to be solving.
Yeah. And so one of my, proudest accomplishments, or I don't know, maybe it's more pride. Sometimes people will look at, their diploma or some moment that they have. I have a screenshot from a Yelp page that says Fine Salads permanently closed. And it's just this great reminder. It's that was some dumb stuff, LaSean. I think winning is the best education, but the second best is learning from your mistakes. And so the reason that story makes a lot of sense as a reminder to myself is I saw firsthand all of these obvious things, and I kept ignoring it because I was yeah, but I'm smarter than that. I can go figure this out. And it's very timely because you can go look at you can go read the 10Q from Sweet Greens, and they got the same problem at scale, right? They've had all of this money. I think it was it John Case? Who was the guy who used to run AOL for years? Do you remember that name? Steve Case, John Case, something like that. But there's a software guy who came and kind of gave them their initial set of funding, and Sweet Greens from jump started thinking this is a venture scale business. And to this day, they've just squandered so much investment trying to figure that out. And I think they've tried vertical integration, they bought farms, all kind of crazy stuff. And I'm this is when ZERP is in place and money is basically free, then sure you can go run these experiments. Now austerity, well, at least the initial stages maybe are creeping in. You have to be a little more thoughtful, but where it sounds I don't have any internal knowledge, where they're landing is oh, we just need to run these at a per location basis very efficiently with good talent. And you look at that, and it's okay, well, you're just a holding company then. This is not a venture scale business. So that's a little aside tangent, but those experiences have helped remind me don't do stupid stuff. And yeah, probably most of this stuff doesn't need to be blitz scaling.
It also becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you said, Sweet Greens, with that example, they're hunting for something that gives them that outsized return. So whether it's vertical integration or whatever it is, because they took venture, Therefore, they need to have a higher valuation and multiple based on their earnings. Therefore, they're trying to do things that are a little more crazy to try to get that bigger return or IP or whatever it is. But if you just strip that out, if you take away that money motivation of venture and you take away that expectation of I need a 5x, a 10x, a 20x, a 100x, you remove that and you just say, hey, well, let me just have a good return. Let me have some profit. Let me grow the business organically. You don't need to start trying these wild, crazy, venture schemes, and you can just run a good, effective business and still scale it up.
100%. Well, and there's two related things there. Number one, when you have money, I experienced this both in startup land, both bootstrapped and venture backed, as well as working in big tech. The projects where I worked on where we were not as constrained with money, and I worked on two basically unconstrained projects where it's like money was like no option. We could spend it whatever we wanted. And the idea that you need to move extremely fast starts to decay. And it's just like, I've never worked on a project, and I'm not saying this is a rule that can't be challenged, but I've personally, and I've shipped a lot of products, many of them have been duds. The ones that have worked, every single one, we had a iteration pace that was not normal, right? It was just like, we compounded our way through execution, experiments, everything was about rapid iteration, very customer centric, all the basics that we know. And when you have a lot of cash, you think, oh, maybe I'll hire this company to come like do this report for me, or maybe I'll go, on this conference and listen to some experts, or like maybe, and like those days turn to weeks, and now you've burned 3 months of time where you could have like got directional, understanding and just done it, and then like gotten the answer, in sometimes 10 cents on the dollar. And so I look at that and say, sometimes I think the money is also just making you move more slowly. And like, that's a danger within itself. The other piece, I love, you can see behind me, I know this is, folks won't be able to see my background. I got a lot of books behind me. And what I get really excited about, with reading is you're getting, 20, 30 years of someone's life experience, distilled down into $20 and 8 hours of your time. And like, that's just like superpower, right? And one of the things I love is reading older books. And I have this personal thing I like to do is, if you're looking at a book and you're like, all right, is this standing the test of time? Like, I want to read the old books, right? Not just like, 5 years, like 50 years. And sometimes I'll go on eBay, I'll go look for some old, first, second edition of it. And, it's like $7. Like, so it's like embarrassing how much information is sitting on eBay, in someone's closet or at a thrift store. And so I love going back to these old books because you see a lot of the first principle thinking that got us to some of these business frameworks that, are in vogue today, but you don't need a lot of complexity. But I say all that to say, like, some of the newer frameworks, I think are holding up pretty well. And I know Lean Startup, the reason I love that book is really, that was like a Spotify playlist. Like, that was him taking ideas that were already kind of proven to kind of package it up into an easy to understand, kind of vehicle. And,
a distillation of other kind of working frameworks.
And that's, I think that's why it seems like that's going to be a book that's going to kind of stand the test of time, or at least be around for a while. But I call that one out specifically because, it's led to a lot of the conversation that we talk about around product market fit. And we, at least for the deals that I see, both companies that are being sold or early stage companies that are getting started, the idea that you have a core thesis on what your product is and you're going to build something amazing, there's usually, if the team is great, like, there's a great story there. Easy to understand, this is the product. But if you really dig and say, like, how much effort have you put on validating the market, the M in that acronym, and a little funky. And then, what's your process to go understand and predictably get to the fit part, like, even worse. And so I really have like tried to condition myself to look at opportunities, kind of the inverse. And so in that PMF, product market fit formula, I'm first saying, how well has this team validated the market? And I have this rule of 100 interviews. If you have not spoken to and documented, 100 conversations with customers, I'm not interested in giving you any money, because that does not cost you capital. It costs you time. But invariably, it will force you to stop thinking that you have the solution already. Like if you're being honest with yourself, like conversation 37, you're gonna be like, oh crap, the thing I want to build is not the thing. And so folks who don't force themselves through that rigor, they're just setting themselves up to, burn money on fire. And then the second piece on the fit is, do you have an operational playbook on, high touch funnel, low touch funnel, how you're going to take customer signal, run experiments, modify the product? And these things, just like, this isn't the thing that costs money, right? These are like systems that, you can talk to with your co-founder. You can start writing test code. Like you can do all these things without spending money. And then it's like, okay, we really feel like we have identified a market. I have this sticky that I have here on what a market is. A market is a group of identifiable individuals who share a painful and recurring problem and have the financial means to spend on solving it. And so if someone says like, oh, I this Gartner or this Forrester PDF told me what my market was, or, I did a Google search, or Bard told me what like, get out of here. Like that does not count. And so if you have a founding team that have a real market, they've spoken to 100 folks, that's not validated, but now you're on the path to validation, and you have some thesis on what your process and systems will be to go chase the fit part. The product part is usually easy, and so then it's simple math on saying like, okay, what size check should I write? So this is a whole long tangent, so getting back to your core question, do I believe in VC? My take is I am trying to delay any business that needs outsized capital as long as possible from taking that outsized capital. And so I am investing in businesses either through permanent capital that will never give any type of liquidation event other than distributions, or companies that will be able to get to a B or C stage without any additional capital outside of what I'm investing. And that it just gives you the leverage, right? You have a very clean cap table at that point. You haven't gotten to all these shenanigans about the board trying to lead you astray because you got somebody early on your board who's like telling you to do dumb stuff. And so for me, staying in control longer is important, and putting the right rigor around the market and the fit part of that equation, I think, are part of the tools to do that.
There's so many good gems in there. I think one of the things that resonates the most with me is, if you focus on building the business first and you don't plan on raising every 6 to 18 months, 6 to 24 months, which is typically the VC approach, is like 12 to 18 is probably what you're targeting, right, for your burn. When you do focus that lens, then you actually have to build a business. You can't just build a product. You have to build a business. And right, if you focus on the business first, the fundamentals of how are we going to deliver our goods? Who are we selling to? Who is that market, right? Who can actually pay for the product that we have? You then just start focusing on building a business. And then the product becomes the vehicle through which you deliver solving that pain. But one of the things that I've said for years, my co-founders say it to ourselves all the time, we say it to clients, we say it to whoever who will listen, is if you build it, they will not come. There's often this mindset of, I just need to build my MVP. I need to build my product. Once I build my product, it's $1 billion idea. It's so innovative. Everyone's going to love it. And then you build it. Well, first of all, ideally, we're not building it. But if you do go down that path and you do invest all this money and you do build your MVP, and then you start trying to find customers and you realize what you built is just not right, you burnt that time, you burnt that money. And sure, you can pivot and iterate and iterate and iterate until you find product market fit. But you're already so far behind the 8 ball because you spent all this money building a product that wasn't quite right. And only now are you trying to find your market and your audience. Yeah. It's, I mean, I think it's a pretty great distillation down of how you're operating. And I love that we're starting to see, I think there's kind of been a change over the past couple of years, maybe even longer, especially coming out of the zero interest rate environment, of different vehicles for funding that are focused on business fundamentals, not are you going to be a 100x $1 billion company, IPO, change the world with an amazing product, et cetera.
Exactly. And you said something that I think is worth underscoring. When you are coming out of the process of saying like, well, I need X dollars to be successful and I need to go build all of this product. If you force yourself to have some real discipline and get really honest, you'll realize you probably don't need the check size. And like, I'm all for funding folks who have a ton of experience, which many times means they have designed a life that has responsibilities. And this is like a tricky situation where it's like, all right, here's a market that I do believe in. And then here is some humans, founder team fit, or founder problem fit that I think could go and solve this. But they need to make X dollars a year just to, solve whatever family or other, life responsibilities they've constructed. And there's some dissonance there that I don't really know how to solve consistently. But sometimes when I hear folks saying we need X dollars, it's not that this problem needs X dollars. It's I've designed a lifestyle that needs X dollars. And so then I, as the investor, have to think, is this the best person to go tackle this problem? Because I believe they've maybe created a personal financial structure that's not in line to actually solving this problem. But if they're the best person, then the extra 200 grand doesn't matter. But if they're not, then I'm going to go look for another team, right? And I just think it's one of those side things that we have to be honest with ourselves, where it's like, okay, maybe the 19-year-old is the best person, maybe it's the 39-year-old. Like you really have to. I try to be apathetic almost in my assessment and say, all right, do I believe in this market? Again, the problem and the customer connected. And then do I believe these are the humans to go and build the right solution to this problem? And sometimes I just look at it and say, I think you've just backed yourself in a life corner where I don't know how to support you properly because, this is probably a 7-year journey. And I don't think that the capital structure you're going to need, or maybe you want to replace. I see this quite often from folks from alum from big tech, and they're like, I used to make X, and so now I've created a life that needs that. And so it's like, well, dude, you need to go fix that before you come over here to entrepreneurship land and try to think there's a 0-day gap between what you were making at your cushy job and the potential cash flows on your new business. And so there's some of these things that I don't feel get enough attention because maybe there's not a great place in the conversation to talk about these social norms or our personal commitments, but they definitely impact the way founders ask for capital and what they think something takes to solve, because they're thinking it takes that through the lens of the lifestyle they've constructed. And I think it's a huge reminder for anybody in Western countries, especially in the US, where maybe the education system has been better, the professional networks have been better, like all sorts of things for why that person probably was, even at a premium, the best human to go solve the problem. But with co-pilots and other types of tools, there are going to be people in other countries that are going to be just as good of an engineer as you, or just as good of a marketer as you, because they're going to get their gaps filled by some type of tool. Now, you could argue like, well, that person will be better because now, the initial person will have all those tools as well. But I believe there's going to be this, closing of the gap on what used to be like, offshore talent that you sent to write your internal tools. They're actually going to build real products. And we just got to be honest with ourselves that, what we want to be true because of our cash positions may not be what the market is going to reward. And so that's kind of an aside, but I think it's a really important piece to say, all right, I need $500,000. Like, well, why do you need $500,000? Maybe the problem only needs 90 grand, but your life needs 500,000.
I think that's a very, very healthy lens to come in from an investor perspective, where we think that the money is we want to think that the money is for solving the problem, for building the prototype, for building the business. But you do need to take a very clear, blunt, no holds barred look at the entrepreneur and what their life is, because you're marrying yourself, you're investing in that person. And if they have a lot of lifestyle inflation that they're trying to maintain while you're trying to get something from 0 to 1, that might not be the best fit. Let's look at,
yeah.
I want to dive into what is the right fit. So we'll get into your business model and specifically like why CAGR, right? And I want to dive into that. But first, who are you looking to invest in? What is your ideal profile of an entrepreneur, of a problem? What's your process? Because I think it'd be helpful also to have your lens, since you've shipped so many products, you are an investor, to kind of look at what does this business look like and what are the markers, the indicators that you're looking for to say, that's worth investing in, that's worth digging in that's worth to kind of go the next step?
Sure. So first off, the types of businesses that I look at are very straightforward: local B2B and vertical SaaS. It's not complicated. If someone says I've created some new fancy AI model, I'm not interested. I don't want any infrastructure, platform, developer tools, none of these things that you're in competition with irrational money. Right. So that's like my first filter. Also, those two items tend to naturally have gates that protect you from the biggest of the players. Local B2B has a natural geographic monopoly to it. And then vertical SaaS typically has some type of TAM gate that will flatten out at some point. And the big players are just like, this is not big enough for me to chase. Right. And so I like the idea that I'm in a neighborhood that the rich people don't want to come and buy my houses and drive up the price. And so those are the two areas, and there's a reason why it's those areas. Those are areas where I have background experience and interests, and I believe there's some structural reasons why I can be a bit more insulated versus some other things that I might chase. When I'm looking at a deal, it's one of two kind of mechanics. The first is just, kind of the Lindy effect. I'm looking for businesses that have been around for a while that have both poor process and, poor audience building. And they're like everybody I think generally knows it's like, oh, well, they're bad at digital marketing. And so I'm just going to update their Yelp, and I'm going to update their SEO and blah, blah, blah. That's table stakes, obviously. I believe many of these businesses going forward are going to become, audience-led or personality-led businesses. And so I kind of look at it and say, is there a natural place for the owner or somebody who's critical to the business to be the face to humanize this? So it's not, Bob's Roofing. I'm really good I'm really focused on prop tech and construction related services right now, just because they're relatively insulated from inflationary pressures, but also they tend to be very bad storytellers, right? Like they don't differentiate themselves. They kind of treat themselves almost as a commoditized kind of effort. And so I'm looking for companies that have been around, and in spite of these gaps, they've survived. Right. And because that means I don't need to go figure out, is the product good? Right.
The fundamental delivery is good because they've been around with bad metrics and bad ability to on the other sides,
on the data room side,
branding,
I can typically go parse through financials in about 2 hours, right? that is not the part that takes the time. And so the audience or how they're going to think about content marketing is really critical. And then the other lever is I look at what is the lift to turn this company into a document first company? And, some people who...
What does that mean?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found working, again, in a breadth of company sizes, I was like, why does this company work? This company didn't work. But it really came down to, why is this team working versus not this other team? And it wasn't until I worked at Amazon where it really kind of became concrete that the idea of writing as this long bureaucratic planning process, it was what I had an aversion to. And I don't think that's a very healthy way to think about writing. But using writing as a communication tool to replace meetings, it's a huge unlock because it forces clarity of thought. It doesn't waste the time of other people trying to stumble across their ideas in the room while other people are listening. You don't get the strong personalities that are great with a deck and they can just use their charisma to convince you this is a great idea. You get more, diversity of thought because the person who's maybe a bit more shy or doesn't have the extroverted personality there's all sorts of goodness. But again, it's not about, we're going to go through a 6-month planning process and do some waterfall. No, it's we're going to talk tomorrow and we're going to make a decision on whether or not we should go through this go-to-market or this other go-to-market, if we should build feature X or feature Y. When we do that, we're going to take 60 minutes and we're going to write a document and we're going to read that for 20 minutes. We're going to annotate and comment for 20 minutes and we're going to discuss and decide for 20 minutes. And there, again, clarity of thought. It also helps onboard folks. It drives transparency. So if you're not in the club and you don't get invited to that meeting, you can still get access to the document. There's just so much goodness around this. And so if I go into a business that, and most businesses do not do this, I'm trying to figure out or assess, how heavy is the lift for me to institute this as part of the culture? And if it's like so far away that it's not going to happen, like it's a quick no to me. And so I'm looking for the cultural propensity to become writers. I actually had a company, we were getting close on the deal, and there's something called a key man clause where you identify the men and women that like need to stay for X period of terms. That's where you kick in earnouts and other types of vehicles. And this guy said, "Well, we don't do that here." I was like, "Well, yeah, I understand you don't do that today. Would love to understand like how you think this could be a tool. Like, I'm not going to be the boss of these people, right? So I can't show up with any point of authority or what have you. I just need to be an assessor. I'm kind of an auditor of the system." And it was just so clear that not only was this person and a couple other folks on the team uncomfortable with this, but they saw it as a way like I am going to be exposed, right?
Right.
And I was like,
Because if it's
this
memorialized and it's written down for all to see for all eternity, it like if you're
bingo,
just a showman, if you're just charismatic and you kind of
yeah,
skate by, you're
yeah.
going to be found out really quickly.
Exactly. And it also exposes another thing. If you haven't built a culture where there is good psychological safety and you can be vulnerable, be yourself, then you're going to feel like when it is memorialized, I get penalized. Like it's just this easy flag that if there's an aversion and friction to that transition, I'm like, these are not my people. I can't help the best way because I want iteration speed to be on our side. Because when you iterate with the right telemetry, you're going to have data. And if you get the right data fast enough, then you can go fix it. But if everything is moving very slowly or it's just full of anecdotes or like all sorts of things where it's just hard to figure out what data do we have to make this decision, then like I'm an easy out. And so those are like the two levers I'm looking for. How do we figure out who the face of this is going to be and use organic, non-advertising to go sell this product? I really believe, as an aside, that many of the parts of the playbook for B2C and consumer influencers um, are going to work very well in the business side, and we're seeing that on some of these prosumer type businesses. There's a great YouTuber. His name is Matt Riesinkler. I think he's in Austin. He used to build custom homes, and now he will tell you like this is the best drywall or this is the best cutting saw or what have you. But the idea that humanizing your company can be a competitive advantage is something that many of these businesses that are for sale, they just haven't thought of because the owners might be 65 years old and they're like, well, I don't want to be that person. And on the business side, you could have a 65-year-old YouTuber, right? And I'm not saying YouTube or podcast is the only way to go and drive this, but I just really believe organic and content marketing, if it's not core to your business, you're going to have a hard time establishing durable trust. And if you don't have durable trust, you have to advertise your way into customer acquisition, and then the economics of your business, the math doesn't work out. And so those are the two big levers that I'm diving in instantly. And in most cases, we filter out in a couple of days after kind of digging in on the company.
Even on the content marketing side, that is almost an extension. It's kind of the external version of the document culture, of the memo culture, of writing things down. Because
Yes,
the beauty of content, whether a written memo internal to your company or a video that you record or a podcast or a YouTube video, whatever it is that it's a representation of who you are. Again, it could be your internal culture or it could be how your brand shows up. And then it's for all to see, right? Whether it's all employees within the company or everyone externally. And I do think that, especially in this day and age where we're advancing faster and faster towards deep fakes, we have the ability to do, fake news has proliferated in the past couple of years. We have the ability to just create content that appears very believable on the surface. We're getting into a point where there's just inherent distrust of content. There's inherent distrust of people unless there's a history of evidence,
there
right?
you go.
Once you have a history of, okay, we've been doing document culture for 3 years, we can kind of see, we can look at these artifacts and see what the business stands for. Or there's, a year worth of podcasts. I can understand who this person is, how they're representing the company over time. It's it's fascinating, and I think it's very spot on, and it's part of the reason why I think we've seen this rise of influencer culture. We've seen this rise of people want a human, they want a face, they want a person, they want to connect with the companies. They don't just want the service now; they want to see a person behind it.
Yeah, bingo. And one of the experiments that we have queued up for next year, it's not a ton of money allocated to this, but I am I'm very interested in how Gen AI and kind of AI tools more broadly are going to empower solopreneurs. And to date, folks haven't really figured out how to service that market profitably. When I was at, I worked in a bunch of different groups when I was at Microsoft, but I spent part of my time in one of the SaaS teams, and I was trying to convince our leadership to let me lead, kind of a small business arm. I was like, all right, let's go take all of our enterprise products and go figure out how to do, direct sales or self service rather, and allow folks to get these at a different price point. Let's kill the per user pricing and go to there's all sorts of business and technical ways you could repackage the same platform, for this target. And every time it was, hey, we have a world class, maybe the best enterprise software sales channel in the world. Let's not go squander like resources chasing like $2-3 billion of revenue, right? And so it's just like that number was just too small for them to go pay attention to. But taking it further, even from small businesses all the way down to a solopreneur, I'm very fascinated by what part of the high touch, low touch funnel, the actual delivery, customer support, and I don't pretend to have any insight on like this is the way to solve this, but I'm going to put up some money next year, and we are going to do the very early stages of building what we're describing as a super app for solopreneurs. And the whole goal is to just say, go talk to customers. Here's a feature. You have a budget of 25 to 100K to build that feature. And you're just going to compound your way to 12, 13, 14 features. And the goal is to say, all right, can you go tackle these in very, targeted manners? And that approach, like no VC would invest in a business this way, right? The checks are tiny, and the goal is to validate before you scale up anything. But I believe like there will be a category, there will be an app, the future QuickBooks of the world is going to be some app for the single person business that banking, bookkeeping, all of these things. There's some banks or credit cards that already do a great job at this, where the bookkeeping is integrated into your debit card, right? And so if you think about all of these types of pieces, there's a lot of folks who are already doing the components, but no one's figured out how to put an interface on top of all of that. And so if you look at like WeChat, what they do at super apps, I have some friends over at Grab, what they do in Southeast Asia. I believe that what we're seeing, if you saw any of the OpenAI keynote, this concept of GPTs, where it's kind of like these agents that are kind of aggregated in a market. I believe there's a whole new input modality where you're going to have your chief of staff. And then your chief of staff is like coordinating with all these other things. And I don't know who's going to get it right, but we're going to throw our hat in the ring on like what's the right UI UX to kind of aggregate these things. And so you don't have to build all the infrastructure. You don't have to build all the AI models. You're not going to do any of that stuff. You just need to go figure out how to pull this all together. So cognitively, one human can run a whole business with a single interface. And my point is like, I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I'm convicted to go try. And those types of ideas, I love that there's a capital stack that can give that permission to go, run as an experiment.
If you enjoyed the podcast so far, make sure to stay tuned for part 2, where we continue the conversation with LaSean and get into personal productivity, how to optimize your life, how to manage your calendar, how to get more out of every minute, and to live an intentional, meaningful life. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening so far. If you're interested in checking out that next episode, it should be out in another week, and make sure to subscribe.